Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Welcome back to a Sunday Hidden Comic Book Gem edition of Grammaticus Books, except for this one, we're not talking about a comic book for this edition of Sunday Comics. No, instead, we're going to be talking about an entire comic book and cartoon museum. The Billy Ireland Cartoon and Comic Book Museum, located on the campus of Ohio State University, which is, quite simply put, the largest collection of cartoons and comic books in existence on the face of planet Earth. It is the largest museum collecting these materials. The Billy Ireland Museum has over 300,000 original cartoons, 67,000 comic books, and over 2.5 million comic strips that are archived there at the museum. It is the largest collection of this type of material in existence on the face of planet Earth. So what we're going to do here today is I'm going to talk a little bit about the museum. Then I'm going to talk about why I went to the museum, because I went there with a mission in mind. And then at the end of the video, I got permission from the museum to film a lot of the exhibits that they have up on display within the museum, and that's all at the end of the video. So you can see a lot of what's inside of the museum itself. So that's the plan. So let's kick it off. What is the Billy Ireland Cartoon and Comic Book Museum? Like I said, it is the largest comic book and cartoon museum in existence on the face of planet Earth. And unless you're a student at Ohio State University, you probably haven't heard of it. But their mission is to archive and preserve as much of this material as possible. And the museum itself is split up into three parts. They have the vault, which is not open to the public, which is temperature controlled, humidity controlled, and it stores and preserves all of these materials. Then attached to the vault is the public reading room that the public can access. This has all kinds of materials in it as well, which you can take down off the shelves and look at. And from the reading room, you can request materials that are located within the vault. And then a curator will go back, find those materials, and bring it out for you so that you can sit there and examine it within the reading room. And then the last part of the museum is the museum display area itself, which is a very large area which contains all kinds of fabulous original artwork from classic cartoonists such as Will Eisner, Winsor McCay, and tons of other ones that are on display there that you can walk through and look at your leisure. And it has a permanent display, and then it has a rotating display as well. You got a large area where they take out different areas, different materials from the vault, and then put it up on this rotating display. Or if there's a traveling exhibit that's making its way around the country, it'll often come in, and about every month, that portion of the museum changes what's on display. So what do they have on display in the museum? All kinds of just amazing original artwork. They've got original art from the New Yorker. They've got Crazy Cat. They've got Bone #1, which is the comic that was done by Jeff Smith, who's a local legend here. Jeff Smith also got his start as a cartoonist at the Ohio State University, submitting cartoons to Lantern, one of the newspapers at Ohio State. And a little vignette on Grammaticus. Grammaticus, when he was at Ohio State decades and decades ago, was also a cartoonist in the school newspaper, The Independent. So just a little factoid on Grammaticus as well there. But you've got Bone #1 signed by Jeff Smith, Love and Rockets #1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, Captain Marvel #1, Mad Cracked. You've got original artwork by Jack Kirby for Captain America that's up on the wall. The big original artwork panels in his pencils and inks, or his pencils, I should say, which is just wonderful. It's fantastic. That's all at the end of the video as well. Dick Tracy, Pogo, Zap, Todd McFarlane, some of the first manga ever created. Will Eisner, Gasoline Alley, Beetle Bailey, Mort Walker, Little Nemo, Winsor McCay. Like I said, you've got actual original Winsor McCay's Little Nemo artwork up on the wall, where Winsor McCay worked on it with his own hand, which is just stupendous. Prince Valiant, and you've got Bill Watterson, a ton of Bill Watterson's original artwork for Calvin and Hobbes, including the original piece of artwork that Bill Watterson submitted in order to get Calvin and Hobbes syndicated. But for me, the gem of the museum isn't these materials. It's not the actual cartoons and comic books. Somebody, they don't know who, there's an embroidered tapestry that's up on the wall. They don't know who made it. They don't know when it was made. But with very bright, vibrant colored threads, somebody stitched in, probably over 100, somewhere between 100 to 150 on this embroidered tapestry, cartoon figures from the 20s, 30s, and the 40s. That's just spectacular. And I got almost every square inch of it on the video at the end of this episode that you can check out. So that's the museum. It's a wonderful place. Why did I go there? Well, I went there with a mission, and give me a second here while I get a shot of water. So I went there with a mission. And the reason I went there is because the last Hidden Sunday Comic Book Gem edition that I did was on Dave Trampier and Wormy. And Dave Trampier was the artist who created Wormy, a running comic strip that appeared in the Dragon magazine that was made by TSR in order to promote Dungeons and Dragons. And he had pages of material of Wormy, his comic book, that would appear in there from 1977 to 1988. And Wormy, quite simply put, is one of the greatest comic books that's ever been created. I would stack up Wormy and Dave Trampier's art with anything that's ever been produced by any comic book artist that you can think of. It was absolutely spectacular. But when Dave Trampier left suddenly in 1988, he dropped off the face of planet Earth. Literally, nobody knew where he was, not even his relatives. And he disappeared, and the comic book stopped. The strip stopped in Dragon magazine, and it quickly became forgotten. And unless you're a huge Dragon fan, you probably haven't heard about Wormy. And I'll link that video that I did last week on Wormy down below so you can check out the whole video. But his art's disappearing. The comic book is disappearing from memory. So I thought if I went to the Billy Ireland Museum, I might be able to convince the curator to invest the resources of Ohio State University in order to obtain the original artwork. That was goal number 8. That was plan A, was see if I could get the curator to invest money in order to get the original artwork, if it even still exists. Failing that was to try to convince them to collect Dragon Magazine's issues number 9 through 132, which have all of the Wormy artwork in it, the whole story. And then at least the entire Wormy comic book would be gathered together in one place that would be accessible to the public. And then the third mission was, if they could get this done, then try to persuade Ohio State to, if they had the rights, or if they could convince Hasbro, who I believe has the rights, to authorize it to produce on their own an anthology of Wormy and publish it there via the Ohio State University. And if I could, I would certainly get a copy and would certainly assist anybody else to get a copy of that anthology who wanted to. So was I successful? Well, I was partially successful. I got to the museum, I went down to the reading room. Unfortunately, the archivist was busy giving a lecture at the time, and I wound up talking to a grad student, a young lady who was working the desk for the vault, for access to the vault. And I told her about Dave Trampier. I mentioned Wormy magazine, and she's typing away on a computer. And then all of a sudden her eyes lit up, and she looks up at me because she had been Googling Dave Trampier and Wormy. And she goes, "Hey, is this related to Dungeons and Dragons somehow?" And I go, "No, it's not related to Dungeons and Dragons. It is Dungeons and Dragons." Dave Trampier was the imagination of Dungeons and Dragons. He had a huge impact on it, and actually had a cultural impact of this enormous event, this cultural milestone in gaming history and in cultural history here in the US, which is Dungeons and Dragons. And she's looking at the Wormy, and her eyes just light up, and she goes, "This stuff is fantastic." And so she gave me a note to write a note to the archivist and put this stuff down on it, the material, the information, so that she could give it to the archivist when they came back. And she was definitely a fan. She called over another grad student who was also a D&D player, because she plays D&D. And she goes, "You got to look at this. This stuff is beautiful." So I know that I got 2 advocates there who were grad students working in the public reading room, who were going to be advocating for the university going out and trying to obtain these materials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow up in a couple months' time. I'll go back down there. I'll try and meet with the archivist and see if they are in fact going to try to collect these materials. And I'm also going to write a letter, a physical letter, to the lady who's the curator in charge of collecting comic book materials for the museum, and try to persuade her, along with some copies of Dave Trampier's art, that this is definitely artwork that is worth preserving. It's culturally relevant. It's not just another comic book. It actually had an impact on society and how we play, and how we do so many things related to gaming, and on D&D itself, which is one of the world's biggest games. Dave Trampier was definitely one of the driving forces behind what made it so popular, and his work definitely deserves to be preserved. But that's it. That's where my mission was. It was partially successful. I will follow up with it. And if any new information comes up on it, I will definitely let you guys know here on the channel. But I'm going to wrap up this portion of it. So if you like, you can see and view the inside of the museum. I've got that video going after this. It's just me holding my camera. It's a little shaky in spots, so please forgive me with that. I start off with sort of an overview of the museum, and then there's a lot of zoom ins on a lot of this just gorgeous material that you can look at from Todd McFarlane, Jack Kirby, Will Eisner, and all kinds of other stuff that's just wonderful, including a lot of really gorgeous original Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson artwork. But that's it. So I'm going to wrap this up and say take care, be safe, and I'll catch you guys next time.
So they cover it with paper and some decorations, but Sputnik starts to make beeping noise, and they go, oh my god, what's going on? It's Sputnik. Yeah. And another one I want to show is the theater of the laptop, but it's there. It is situated in the this one.
Low battery.
It's okay. You burn it up. It's okay.